Well, hello again. If I could ever have everybody find their seat, we'll continue along with our program here. At this time, we are going to have a featured speaker. I'm going to call to the stage Chelsea Didinger. She joins to give us a little bit of a break, and she's going to talk about, she is food science and human nutrition PhD candidate at Colorado State University. Bean outreach is her passion. She has started a website to share the behind the scenes world of beans. It's called A Legume a Day. She also leads engagement efforts for the Colorado Dry Bean Committee. If you haven't followed her yet on social media, now will be a good time. She is doing Dry Bean a World of Good. So Chelsea, please join me at stage.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Closer to the mic. Yes.
Better? Yes. Okay, I guess I won't walk around like I normally do. Anyway, good morning. It's so nice to be here with you all talking about For the Love of Beans, something I imagine we can all relate to. Eric, thank you for that introduction. So I'll introduce myself a bit more in a couple slides. But first, I wanted to say thank you for having me here for a Bean Day. Knowing that I would be here did inspire me to create this lovely artwork for you all, so I hope you enjoy. But I was emailing back and forth with Mitch about being here, and I've noticed, first of all, that everybody makes a weather joke, so I will now proceed to make mine. But he thanked me for being willing to come to the frozen tundra in January. And I told him there is no place I would rather be, and I was being serious, okay? Being in a room full of bean colleagues, of growers, of processors, of all the other folks here, that's my idea of a good time. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. What I want to touch on today is kind of why beans. So why should we all be so excited that we're working with beans, and then relay that excitement to consumers? Also increasing bean consumption, and then touch a bit on bean advocacy. I said I would kind of provide some context of why I'm here in a couple more slides, and we are now at that point. So hello, my name is Chelsea Didinger. And in case you're wondering why I am here, I will give you a bit of context of what I do, as long as I can get the pointer to work, which is normally my downfall, so no guarantees. OK, excellent. I'm a PhD student at Colorado State University, food science and human nutrition, like he mentioned. And I'm graduating this year, finally, so you can all celebrate with me. But what I do is quite literally, increasing bean intake. That is the topic of my PhD research. So I do a lot of outreach with consumers, and I do fun things like play with mats and cookers and look at how we can make cooking time faster and just easier for folks. I do, create bean handouts, bean materials to distribute recipes. Also run online bean classes through CSU Extension throughout our communities in the state, but also reaching outside the state as well. And then fun and creative outreach efforts like creating bean calendars called Bean Appetit. So each month linked to different bean resources and everything like that. So just reaching audiences in a different way. And then I also conduct outreach efforts for the Colorado Dry Bean Committee, which is a lot of fun. It means I get to be at farmers markets, at county fairs, at ag events, talking about beans with adorable children, which is, that's about as good as it gets, right? And then, bragging on the news about how amazing beans are. And I also get to join growers in the field, see that. And I want to give a shout out to, I don't have a laser, but that gentleman on the blender bike there. So that is Dr. Henry Thompson. I imagine a lot of you have met him or heard of him. So he's my mentor. I'm honored to work with him. But he's not your typical academic. He's the kind who will also join you at a farmer's market, jump on a blender bike, get people excited about why they should be eating beans too. And then they mentioned that I started A Legume a Day. And so I'll just touch briefly on that, why I did that. It's because I love beans, and I want to share that with people. I feel really lucky to get to see a lot of that behind-the-scenes world because I talk with growers, I talk with dealers, I talk with researchers, talk with the public, and I want to share that. Because there are so many fantastic aspects of beans that when people understand that more, they also become excited, they also become bean advocates. So that is why I started that, again, to just share that excitement and enthusiasm about beans. Now, when people see that both work and play is all about beans for me, and that I bring bean to piking, and that I wear bean t-shirts and necklaces, and that I plant beans in the community garden plot just to watch them grow because I think they're beautiful plants, they kind of look at me and they're like, huh, why beans? And I tell them, because beans are the perfect food, all right? Period. I don't think there's room for argument. I don't think there's room for discussion. They're perfect, but we can talk about why, you know? And so I did leave this slide blank intentionally because you've heard me talk a lot, but again, my focus is outreach. I like to get a conversation going with people, even if they don't want to talk to me, right? And so I noticed you haven't really been asking questions today, but this is your chance to chime in. I'm sure there are at least 2 brave people in the room. What are some reasons that you love beans? You don't even have to raise your hand. You can just yell. It can be anonymous. And awkward pauses don't deter me, so I'll just wait.
The taste.
Taste, excellent, thank you.
Color.
Color, they're beautiful.
The many uses.
The many uses, super versatile, right? Protein, incredibly nutritious. Yeah, thank you. Oh, see, more than 2 brave people in this room. We're so proud of each other, right? So these are some of the reasons that I bring up, and a lot of them were just mentioned. Beans are so delicious and incredibly versatile. You can use them in desserts, and you can use them in a whole spectrum of savory dishes as well. And then affordable and long shelf life. And I've heard this mentioned today, and especially in the conversation around food aid and everything that we've been having. They're affordable. This is critical for food security, both nationally and internationally. And they have a long shelf life. So that can reduce food waste, but also it's important because let's think of other superfoods maybe, right? So I think we can agree that beans are a superfood, but let's say you go buy kale or something like that, and you put it in your fridge, and maybe you kind of forget about the kale, and a week later you come back and it doesn't look so spiffy, right? That's not the case with beans. They can last for a really long time. They have that long shelf life. Plus, rich global culinary history. We heard mention of cultural relevancy. So there are bean dishes across the globe. And so you're not forcing beans on people. They want to have those beans. They're a part of their diet anyway. And it also means we can get consumers excited because they can travel the world with bean dishes. You can travel to Central America this time, or you can go to Southeast Asia and get people engaged there as well. And of course, they're known for environmental and human health benefits too. That's an impressive list, so we are very lucky to be working with beans. And on that note, I want to talk a bit about increasing bean intake. Like I said, that is the topic of my PhD research, and I imagine that the bean industry is also at least somewhat interested in this topic too. But before we talk about increasing intake, it's important to kind of have an idea of baseline. So if you look at this chart, you can see those green bars, and that is the current recommendation for the dietary guidelines. And it depends on your age, it depends on your gender, but maybe 1.5 cups, maybe up to 3 cups of cooked beans a week. I don't know about you, that's what I normally have in a day, okay? But if you look here, we're not even getting that. So the average is more like 1/2 cup to 1 cup of cooked beans a week. And that's really not enough to be promoting environmental and public health, which means there's exciting room for improvement. And it also begs the question, well, what is it that consumers want, right? This is the perfect food. We need to help them realize this. So you can look at a lot of different resources. You can look at social media. You can look at predicted food trends. Those always come out, December, January, right? What do we expect to see this year? You can also look at research teams looking into this. But generally, when you kind of group all these things together, and it is more nuanced, but if you are grouping, there are kind of 3 areas that these categories fall into where we can kind of encourage consumers to have more beans, right? Nutrition and health is one of them. Beans are a superfood. They have an amazing nutritional profile you won't see in other foods. But probably including some of us here, if the only thing that appeals to you about a food is that it's nutritious, that's usually not enough to sway your decision, certainly every day, right? And then there's also sustainability. That's a key part of the puzzle, and it's becoming more and more important. Consumers are looking for environmentally friendly choices. So beans have a great story to tell there, very important for sustainable food systems. But again, people don't make decisions only based on sustainability. And so now we can look at the purple circle, right? So versatile and delicious. I heard people saying beans are delicious, which is great. I'm glad that bean industry folks agree that beans are delicious. That's important. So it has to taste good, right? People aren't going to eat something if it doesn't taste good, let's be honest. I'm sure that all of us fall into that category as well. And then versatility, which I think is really important because when you read surveys or conduct surveys with consumers, when you talk to folks, at least in the US, we often hear, oh yeah, I like chili and I like refried beans. Well, so do I. I love them, they're delicious. But if those are the only two ways you're eating beans, you're probably not having them every day. You're probably not having as many as you should, again, for those public and environmental health benefits. Luckily, beans are super versatile, and so if we can share that, that really helps too. So when we see consumers kind of understanding all these different buckets, so to speak, that is when we're kind of moving the needle more on increasing bean consumption. So when I was planning this talk, I had a lot more slides, and then I realized, okay, I guess I don't have 5 hours to talk about how cool beans are. So I cut out the slides that I normally share with consumers that just share, those sustainability benefits, talk about the nutrition, because I figured if you want to have access to those resources, let me know, I'm happy to share them. And instead, I want to share a little bit about the research that we're actually doing, so you can see kind of some of what's coming out of that research. So the two projects I wanted to discuss briefly today are this class that I'm running through Extension, and then also a bean cuisine citizen science project, which I'll talk a bit about in a few more slides. Okay, you don't actually have to close your eyes, but you could. So close your eyes and imagine that you are a consumer taking this class. Maybe you're not a farmer, so you don't have a lot of background, and you can open your eyes and look at the beautiful picture now. But we're talking through this, and we kind of talk through farm to table. So we've talked a bit about what bean production looked like, showed them photos to show that no, beans don't really grow on trees or something, And then after that, moving into the amazing nutritional profile of beans. And I share that beans are about 2 to 3 times richer in fiber than whole grains are. A common recommendation is that if you want to increase your fiber intake, which most of us should in America, we have pretty low fiber intake, then switch out your refined grains for whole grains. And that's totally true. That will increase your fiber intake, but it's important to know and empower consumers with accurate information, and beans are about 2 to 3 times richer. So I talk through that, and then I show this slide, which I know the numbers might be a bit small. Happy to send this to you. But when you ask consumers, what are some fiber-rich foods you think of, oats have consumers view oats as just one of the best options for fiber. So to really bring home the message, check this out. These are about similar caloric intake, so I'm not trying to bias this with calories. But if you look at the fiber, right, it's more than 2 times higher in beans. So I believe it says 12 on the bean side and 5 on the oat side. That's a big difference. But that's not all. Consumers love protein, and conveniently enough, beans also have more protein. They're really unique because they have about 1-to-1 fiber to protein, and they're high in both, making them, again, the perfect food. So this is a great option if consumers want more protein as well. And in case that wasn't enough, there is also the micronutrient profile, so those vitamins and minerals in beans. So you can see that there's more iron in them, but they're also potassium, right? So beans can be a great source of potassium as well. So just kind of sharing some of these messages with people. And then after the class, we asked people, what shared maybe most motivated you to eat beans? And so this was one of the quotes that came out of that. And so I didn't appreciate just how much more fiber they have than oats and other grains. So this type of information, it does make an impression on people. It gets that message across. And then we move on into kind of versatility and ideas of how to use beans. Because again, like I mentioned, if the only way you're having them is chili and refried beans, you're not enjoying them as much as I would argue you should be. So we're almost to lunch, so I'm gonna shamelessly show you some food photos now so that you're hungry in just a bit. So dips are a great option. Beans can be a great base for quite the variety of dips. Also for mixing with meat, right? You can reduce the cost of a dish and you can add fiber when you mix those together, beans and meat. There's beans on toast, and it doesn't have to be the British style. You can put your own spin on that. Then sheet pan bakes are also really popular with consumers, so getting beans incorporated into those as well. Stir fries, baking. So there are bean flours. You can also puree beans and add them in baking as well, and consumers are looking for healthier baking options. So again, perfect solution for them. Bean pastas. This is actually one of the predicted food trends from Morning Ag Clips. They were, instead of wheat-based pastas, they were saying other pastas are becoming more popular, and they did give a specific call out to bean-based pastas. Beans and potatoes, this is something that really intrigued people in the class as well. I figure, why have just potatoes when you could add beans to it? That's my solution to most problems in life, just add beans. But if you add beans, you are boosting that fiber, you are boosting that protein, and you are maybe potentially minimizing your carb coma or food coma that will come after. And then there are bowls. So a Chipotle-style restaurant, right, they put beans on those, but consumers also make bowls on home. Those are trending in food bloggers and everything. And so making sure that beans are added to those bowls. Smoothies or milkshakes if you have a sweet tooth. And people often look at me like I'm crazy when I tell them they should add beans to milkshakes, but don't knock it until you've tried it. So it can boost that creaminess profile of a smoothie, and it also, again, is adding that fiber and protein. If I haven't said it enough times, there it is one more time. Then bean salads, because of the different textures, colors, tastes of beans, limitless options there. For example, if you take a Waldorf salad and you add a different type of a white bean or something to it, that is a great option too, and it makes it more satiating. And then there are the healthy baking. Everybody wants a healthier dessert, right? A little bit less guilt there. And so if you haven't tried a black bean brownie, I'm not really sure what you're waiting for, so please go home and make them. But there are also white bean blondies, there are dessert bean dips, tons of options there too. And so after showing some of this information and engaging with people in the class about it, we asked, what bean recipes or dishes are you most excited to try? And then we came back 1 month later and we said, what have you tried? Did you like it? So there were lots of answers, but I pulled out a few here. So one person mentioned having beans for breakfast. This is really common in some other cuisines around the world, not so much in the US, but sharing this information inspired people, oh, I can add beans to breakfast. Also smoothies, see, it did appeal to, it caught their attention, perhaps because it sounded so strange, but you should try. And then healthy desserts too. So this last comment is somebody who came back a month later, said they had tried it, really enjoyed it. So getting people to think out of the box so that they can really benefit from beans and having them more regularly. And then the next project I said I wanted to talk about was this bean cuisine. So essentially what that was created 2 weeks of bean recipes where 35% of the dietary protein was coming from beans. That came from a study that was done in our lab, but it translates to at least 1.5 cups of cooked beans a day, sometimes more, and it meant there was basically 56 recipes because you could have beans for breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner. So there are recipes for all of these, right? And we worked with an amazing group of citizen scientists. So those were folks out in the community who we had an orientation, and then they got a full day of recipes and they got to cook those. They gave us feedback on those. But perhaps even more importantly, we were engaging with them. So we were learning from them. They were learning what's actually happening in the research community. And then they were becoming bean advocates in their community because they were getting excited about this too. So these are some of the photos that the citizen scientist sent me. I think they're beautiful. It was good to see, and you can see some of that versatility there too. And we saw an increase in a lot of things that we wanted to be seeing, right? So they were increasing cooking with dry beans because they were becoming more familiar with how to also cook dry instead of only canned. Increasing likelihood of purchasing local beans, a frequency of bean intake. That one made me especially happy, right? And then the knowledge of just how versatile beans are. But this is a list, and it's not as exciting as seeing maybe some quotes of what people actually said. So I pulled them out, and I kind of bolded certain parts that I wanted to stand out, right? But this one, the blue comment, was that they were starting to use dry beans more. They
They found them tastier. They were excited to actually feel more confident cooking with dry beans in addition to just canned. And then another one commented on, and we're looking at orange circle now, right? I'm more aware of ways to incorporate beans in every meal. So that versatility is coming across, and we really do mean every meal. Like I said, it was breakfast, lunch, snack, and dinner, okay? And they were trying to eat more beans after this. So it's getting them excited. And then the last one, the green bubble, I want to point out two things. So this person said that they shared the finished product with their neighbor. And this is great. Again, we talked about creating bean advocates, and it was something we were seeing really across the board. So citizen scientists were commenting about tasting it when their in-laws came to visit, or sharing it with their kids, their spouses, their neighbors, their friends, and getting feedback and sharing recipes. So we want there to be bean enthusiasts in the community because, we want more people sharing how wonderful beans are. So that was great. And then this person also commented they're now trying to have at least a cup of beans a day, and their intestines are liking this change. Okay, so these are all good things. We were happy to see these. All right, and then I'll touch real quickly on bean advocacy. So I had the privilege of going with the U.S. Dry Bean Council and also Juan Osorno, which I was thrilled about because I'm a huge fan of his work, and I'm glad he's speaking after me. But we went to 4 different countries. We went to Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, and the Dominican Republic. And we got to speak about beans, right? We got to talk about U.S. dry beans. And my particular focus was tools to increase bean consumption. And I kind of went through sort of what we're talking about today, but I wasn't sharing about the research as much as just kind of information that would empower people, get them excited, and then they can use that, right? Because there were public health representatives and different folks in that room. And another thing we did in addition to the presentations was we went to different restaurants, we went to markets, open air markets, we went to grocery stores. That's normally the first thing I do when I travel. I want to see what beans are like in that area. So that was, again, my idea of a good time there. But there are different trends that you're seeing, right? Different countries have different beans that are popular there. For instance, black beans in Guatemala, red beans in El Salvador. But we could also see, beans in desserts or beans for breakfast. You can see some photos up there, beans and rice. And so it's good to have an understanding of these trends so we can see, what maybe we could encourage, what other bean varieties we can encourage in these countries, what other bean dishes, ways to use beans that we can encourage, but also to bring back to the US. People want to travel the world. So if they can travel the world through beans and we can share some of those trends, that's really helpful. And then something that I learned that actually Juan was the one who pointed out to me was that pinto beans they weren't always popular in the DR, and they've become more popular recently. So that's great news, right? It's a sign that sharing this information and everything is helping people to introduce new varieties, eat more beans. And then Eric mentioned that I have a Leguma Day website. I mentioned that briefly. This is not a shameless plug. The reason I'm showing this is because I hope that after kind of this presentation, you can see why I'm sharing the particular information I am. It's my personal outreach platform to specifically share information that I'm finding encourages people to eat more beans. So it's recipes to get them inspired for versatility, but it's also kind of some of that behind the scenes in the field research. It's tips about nutrition, it's tips about how to actually cook them, and then just some fun stuff because you want it to be interesting and engaging for people. But I'm obviously a very small piece in a very large puzzle, and I think we all have a role to play in this. A lot of wonderful people in this room I know are doing great work. So there is misinformation out there about beans, right? Maybe they don't understand how to cook them or misunderstanding of how it's grown or something. And there's also just plain lack of information. For instance, if you don't have an idea of the different ways to use beans or don't understand how to cook them, whatever the case may be. So addressing this kind of from farm to fork, if you are an amazing grower actually making this possible for us all because you're growing the beans, you can share some of that information. If you're on the processing side, sharing how that goes, just sharing that full story with people because that really engages them and it makes them want to be having more beans. I put North Harvest logo up here because I really mean it. I'm really impressed with the work that you're doing. You cover research in the field and you also have great outreach. So it's fantastic to see and happy to be here. And then I wanted to share one last quote here. So when we're empowering customers or consumers and everything, we want to just reach them with all this information. And so in the class, again, I asked, what motivated you, and this is what somebody said. They said the tremendous health benefits for low cost, both monetary and environmental, also that there are a wide range of pulses grown locally. So that's what they took away from the class and was motivating them to eat more, and this made me really happy because I didn't prompt it, but I feel like it falls into what we were talking about today. They want those nutritious benefits, the health benefits, they want the environmental benefits, they want to understand that in the field story. Great to see. And so again, it's more nuanced than this, but if we're talking in terms of buckets, these are kind of the three areas that when they overlap and consumers understand this, we are seeing an increase in bean intake. But I left one thing out, and if the clicker works, you can see that that thing is, okay, passion. Yes, why? Because we work with the perfect food, right? We don't need to just relay a boring list of attributes. We can tell people with true enthusiasm and excitement, we work in beans, this is why. We can share that with them, and that passion is really what relays this message and gets people on board and excited to have more beans. So that is what I have for you today. I'm not really sure what my time, I think I might be close to time, but I am here. I am always available to talk about my favorite topic in the world, so please feel free to come find me, to email me, to call me. Let's talk beans. Thank you again for having me.
Yes, thank you, Chelsea. That was, thank you for being here today. It's great to have such an enthusiastic and, yes, passionate advocate for dry bean consumption. So, and with that, I'll have Leanne Schaefer and Jed, Leanne's gonna handle it thus? Okay, so at this time we have a little presentation for Chelsea.
North Harvest would like to present this Friend of the Bean Award to Chelsea Didinger in appreciation and recognition for your inspiration and dedication to the dry bean industry. North Harvest Bean Growers Association appreciates your continued efforts to promote dry beans and enthusiastically get other producers and consumers on board with us. And we want to thank you for all your hard work. Please give us a round of applause for all her hard work she does for us.
I didn't know I was getting this, so Friend of the Bean, this will definitely be displayed. This is my life goal, to be a friend of bean. So I really appreciate you having me, and I really mean it. Talk to me. If there's anything I can do to help relay what you're doing, we can share that information. Let's get people eating more beans. Thanks.